Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. We are heading into the month of March, and not only do we have spring practice kicking off, we are also starting to get a really good feel of, hey, where are these programs going on the recruiting trail over the next couple of weeks and months? And you're starting to see some top targets. It's kind of pop up for some of these programs, and I don't think there's a more fascinating program to monitor over the next couple of weeks and months than Mike Norvell in Florida State. I want to have two different conversations. I want to talk about what went wrong in 2024. I kind of spent my Monday morning looking back at the last couple of years and kind of diving into how Florida State built their roster going into the 2024 year, in which there were clearly some problems in terms of the roster building that took place over the last 12 months. Then I want to circle back to, hey, how are we fixing the problem? What are we doing differently going into the 2025 year in recruiting the 2026 class? This is going to be a little bit of a into the weeds episode. You might even use the word nerdy episode, but I think it's personally just a fascinating conversation where in the college football landscape, a lot of teams are doing a lot of different things in terms of how they want to build their roster. And let's look at what Florida State has done and what they are going to be changing moving forward. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Florida State fans, let it fly in the comment section. A lot of different, takes you can have in terms of what went wrong for Florida State in the 2024 year. Let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. It's going to be a really fun next couple of weeks and months talking this program. Now, I want to start with what went wrong. And this is kind of what went wrong both on the high school recruiting trail and in the transfer portal. Starting on the high school recruiting trail, there's one thing that I just clearly stands out to a lot of Florida State fans. And I've seen y'all feel this way on Twitter. I've seen y'all feel this way on the message board. And that is we are just not recruiting the state of Florida the way we need to. There's no reason Florida State should not be dominating the state of Florida when it comes to recruiting the high school ranks. Look back at the last couple of years, 2025, out of the top 40 kids in the state, Florida State landed 2. In 2024 was actually a pretty good year in state. Out of the top 40 kids, Florida State landed 6. That's probably closer to how it should look. 2023, only 2 of the top 40 kids. Having 2 out of your last 3 classes where you missed the way Florida State did in state, that's not sustainable. You look at all these top programs across the country, the programs that are having a lot of success, a team like Texas, a team like Ohio State, their backyard, they recruit exceptionally well. The state of Florida is so loaded with high school talent all over the football field. There's no reason Florida State should not be dominating the high school ranks in the state of Florida when it comes to the high school recruiting trail. Secondly, and what I think was the biggest reason we saw the 2024 season get so ugly was there's a lot of projection and there was a lot of kind of lottery tickets that Florida State took. And when you have too much projection and not enough substance, and the projection doesn't either one just doesn't hit, or you need a couple more years for some of these guys, that's when you get an ugly season like 2024. And they had so much projection both in the transfer portal and at the high school recruiting ranks. I mean, you take a look at some of these high school classes, some of the best players Florida State brought in according to the recruiting services. They were really intriguing players, guys that we liked when they were coming out of high school, but a lot of these guys were some big time projections, right? Go back to 2023, a guy like Akeem Williams. Take one look at him. You know why he was a 5-star wide receiver, but was a guy that only caught for 400 yards his senior year of high school. Guy like Lucas Simmons, the number 2 player in that Florida State class in 2023. He was a guy that lived in Europe as a kid, moved over to the United States, was extremely new to football. 2 guys that we loved coming out of high school, but 2 guys that were very big projections when you were thinking about what they could be as college football players. Then you go to the 2022 class, who was your number 1 player? Sam McCall. And Sam McCall, another one of the, hey, we love the athletic profile, but we're not really sure where he's going to play on the football field. And we haven't seen him become a great football player at the high school ranks. He's now at Georgia State. You look at a guy like A.J. Duffy. A.J. Duffy threw for only 800 yards his senior year at IMG Academy. And that was a pretty big projection as well. And then Florida, and this is kind of where I think it got kind of hairy for Florida State, is You had all these guys on your roster from the high school recruiting classes that were pretty big projections. You supplemented it with the transfer portal with a ton of projections as well. I mean, Malik Benson, you paid a lot of money to get a guy in Malik Benson who caught for what, 24 yards at Alabama before coming over. Maybe it was a little bit more than that, but he was not a proven pass catcher at the college football level coming to Florida State. You look at a guy like TJ Ferguson, also coming from Alabama, a guy that certainly looked the part. You could tell why he was a top 200 prospect coming out of high school, but had never really played any meaningful football coming over to Florida State. Marvin Jones coming from Georgia, former five-star guy, but again, not necessarily a proven commodity as a football player. A guy like Tamiwa Diraje coming over from West Virginia, another one of those guys that you kind of like the athletic profile, but not necessarily proven ball player. Florida State had a lot of projection at the high school ranks. They had a lot of projection in terms of transfer portal additions. And when you have a program, when you have a football team that is just kind of based on 100% projection, and those projections don't hit, that's how you get a team that got as ugly as Florida State did in the 2024 year. Now, where is Florida State going? We talked about it in the transfer portal. It's a lot less flash, it's a lot less projection, and it's a lot more substance. And you go out and land 4 offensive linemen who all have multiple years of starting experience. You look at a guy like Squirrel White. And Squirrel White, I think, has a lot of upside, but he's also a proven commodity pass catcher in the SEC. The names might not be as flashy, but you know these guys coming into Florida State from the transfer portal can play. There's very little projection, and it's a lot more substance. And then you look at the high school recruiting trail. That's exactly where Florida State is going as well. Now we're getting into, hey, where's Florida State going in the 2026 class? This is arguably one of my favorite players in the 2026 class, Jason Lopez from Chaminade Madonna and down there in Miami. You talk about production. Jason Lopez is not going to walk into a room and make anyone's jaw drop like Akeem Williams did. This is a kid who's caught for over 4,200 yards in his high school career, going back to his 8th grade year. This is, to me, is like a carbon copy of a guy like Xavier Restrepo. Where look, the high end upside, is he going to be a top 3 pick in the NFL draft? No, probably not. But you land this type of kid, you know he's going to be a really productive football player for you over the next couple of years. It's only 5'10", 165. You turn on the film, he knows how to separate. He's good after the catch. He's a very quarterback-friendly pass catcher. You don't catch for over 4,200 yards unless you're not pretty dang good at the position. He's not all flashy, but he's a guy that we know is a really good football player. Next one on the list, Trent Henderson. And another focus you're going to see from Florida State is, hey, we want to get guys that fit what we want to do. You look at this Tony White defense, that jack linebacker spot, really, really important. Trent Henderson is carbon copy of what you're looking at for in a jack linebacker. 6'4", 225, looks closer to probably 240 on the junior year film. He can come off the he might just be a pure edge rusher, but he's very good coming off the edge, of which you need your jack linebackers to be. Very, very good in the run game, but also can drop back in coverage in some of those shallow zones and be an athlete in space. I mean, this is a guy that if Tony White wants an ideal jack linebacker, it's probably a guy like Trenton Henderson. Another guy that I think this is another kind of shift in terms of what Florida State's doing is we need more speed on defense, specifically at the linebacker spot. You talk about one of the things that went wrong for Florida State. These linebackers were nowhere near good enough, and they were nowhere near the athletes that you need. You know, we talk about this all the time. Where is the sport of college football going specifically on offense? It is speed and space. We are going to get the football to our playmakers in space and force defenses to run and chase and tackle us in space. If you don't have linebackers that can go tackle running backs in the flat, carry a tight end up the seam, go sideline to sideline and close the distance, you ain't going to have a ton of success in this modern era of college football. Florida State linebackers were slow in 2024, and I think that was a direct relation with, hey, we didn't recruit good enough athletes at the linebacker spot. A guy like Isaiah Williams, who was formerly committed to Florida State still wants him in the fold here. About as athletic of an off-ball linebacker as you're going to see. The tricky part with him is he spends a lot of time coming off the edge. Now, I think he'll play off-ball linebacker in college, but he plays a lot off the edge. But he is a phenomenal athlete that brings much-needed athleticism to Florida State in the off-ball linebacker spot. Let's take a look at the top quarterback for Florida State, Landon Duckworth, who I am a massive fan of. Not only just a massive fan of the quarterback here, I'm a massive fan of the fit that you could have in the Gus Malzahn offense. And quite frankly, I think Landon Duckworth is too. I mean, he was committed to South Carolina, backs off his commitment, was very interested in committing to Gus Malzahn at UCF. Now, Gus Malzahn is going to go after him for Florida State too. Extremely good athlete running the football, which is you need to have if you want to run this Gus Malzahn offense successfully, but also a very talented thrower of the football. And again, this is a proven commodity here. He's going into his senior year. He's going to be a 4-year starter at the high school ranks, a guy that's thrown for over 7,000 yards, 86 touchdowns, has also rushed for 1,300. You know, because there's a large sample size of him being a really good quarterback at the high school ranks, there's not a ton of projection here. And you know he's going to fit the Gus Malzahn offense. You know, if I were to summarize, like the biggest change we are seeing with Florida State is, hey, this is not me getting up here in saying you don't want to go bet on a guy like Akeem Williams. You ask Mike Norvell, 10 out of 10 times he's going to take a guy like Akeem Williams because the upside is so good. But if you fill up your roster with only guys like Akeem Williams who have all this potential but aren't necessarily the best football players yet, it's kind of how you have a 2024 year. You want to build the roster the right way, in my opinion. It's, hey, we're going to go bet on some high upside athletes because that's how you go win a national championship. But you also have to make sure you're getting a lot of good football players too. So your roster is not only high upside projections. And I think you're seeing Florida State take those steps over the last couple of weeks and months. We'll see what Florida State does in the 2026 class. I'm really excited. Hey, the one thing I'll end this on is it got ugly in 2024. And trust me, Mike Norvell knows it more than anybody. He's going to die trying fixing the problem. And you're seeing him make the changes. He made the changes with the coaching staff. I think he's making the changes in terms of how he's putting together this roster. That's a plus. That's a big-time plus if I'm a Florida State fan. And it's not all going to come together in 2025. I don't think there's Florida State fans sitting here and saying, we need to go win a national championship. Let's go have a building season. Let's show that this program's going back to where it belongs, and let's start building this thing the right way. And I think that's what Florida State's trying to do. We'll break down the commitments as they roll in. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. We got spring ball kicking off relatively shortly. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.